My friend Riza and I only share a connection because my friend Kate went to Nepal to volunteer as a teacher in 2002 following a breakup, and Riza was doing the same in the neighbouring village. After a busy week eating dal bhat, a dish of rice and lentils for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they used to escape on weekends and go in search of cafes which sold Nutella and wine. On Riza's birthday, her family organised for a baby elephant to be hers for a day. Karen enjoyed an amorous encounter with a very good-looking Nepalese tour guide. The same summer, I was living with my mum and dad, working as a receptionist at the housing executive in Bangor. The highlight of my day was eating a corned beef sandwich at lunch, savouring every moment away from the phone and complaints about blocked drains and crumbling chimneys and unprocessed claims. When Kate visited home again and told me all about this beautiful girl she'd met and showed me pictures of them trekking in the Himalayas, I felt wildly jealous. When she asked if I fancied a trip to Venezuela the following August, I said yes straight away, despite not really knowing where it was. Of course, Kate hadn't actually checked with Riza to see if it was all right, but happily she said yes. Their German friend Ronnie, who they also met in Nepal, came along too, and I felt very sorry for Riza's mum, also confusingly called Riza, hosting 3 visitors with limited Spanish in her apartment, along with her son Oscar and their new pug puppy Bruno. Back then, Caracas wasn't a safe city. Karen was a keen photographer and she wanted to visit the barrias, or the shanty towns, and document the lives of these city dwellers. Riza said an emphatic no, having already been robbed at gunpoint that year, an occurrence which was becoming alarmingly frequent. Once, when a man demanded her handbag, she asked if she could at least hold on to her identification papers. Of course, muttered her assailant, I'm not an animal, you know. Well, at least he was polite about it, she conceded. Another time, she heard a man knock on her car window and pointed to her earrings and watch with his pistol. Riza handed them over sharpish. Her brother Oscar wasn't quite so fortunate. With the knife held to his throat in the park, he was relieved of his wallet and then given 2 black eyes for his trouble. She told us these stories on our first night as we sat under twinkling fairy lights having supper. I tried not to choke on my empanadas. However, she and her mum had planned every element of our stay with painstaking precision. They had booked us rooms in hotels and tickets for buses and cable cars and even a ride in a small airplane into the jungle. They wanted us to see Venezuela in all its magnificent diversity. Our first stop was a trip north, lounging on white sands, eating freshly caught lobster and swimming in a deliciously warm Caribbean sea. It perhaps sounds more luxurious than it actually was, as we spent one night in a tent on a surprisingly chilly beach. We discovered that when sandflies bite, it really hurts. In the fishing village of Shorini, we stayed in a guest house, which was slightly better, except the 5 of us were squashed into one room, with Kate suspended above us in a hammock. Kate met a chap called Carlos at a beach bar, so for one night anyway, the hammock remained vacant. We were just relieved she didn't bring him back. At night, we drank Cuba Libras with wedges of lime and swiveled our hips to salsa beats. Riza rang her mum one afternoon. We're living la vida loca here, she said, recounting all our antics. A string of angry Spanish invective crackled down the line, and Riza held the phone away from her ear. Bruno, the pug, had torn pillows and duvets to shreds in retaliation for us having left him. He'd enjoyed the crack of a busy apartment. And Mum said, never mind us, she is living the viva fucking loca in Caracas, laughed Riza. We journeyed to the town of Merida at the foot of the Andes and visited Angel Falls, swinging in hammocks under the stars and eating our body weight in arepas. In Merida, there is an ice cream shop which has 100 flavours of ice cream, including baked beans and a black one. Might have been made with squid ink. It was disgusting. We took overnight buses which were so air-conditioned that our teeth chattered and our hands turned blue. But Riza was always on her guard. In 2003, the future President Chavez was encouraging voters to come to the capital in their droves, bribing them with pocket money for their trip and cheap rum. I noticed a palpable sense of hostility in the bus stations towards us, and Riza explained that animosity was being stirred up towards foreigners and any Venezuelans who had money at all. It was a sign of things to come under the next leadership. In between these adventures, we stayed in the apartment in Caracas where her mum selflessly provided a laundry service and prepared copious amounts of food. We feasted on fried plantains and yucca chips and coconut curry, freshly squeezed passion fruit juice, and slabs of tres leches, a dessert which tasted as good for breakfast as it did for lunch. Your mum must really like cooking, I said to Riza. God, no, said Riza. She hates it. She just wants to look after you. Carlos had fallen quite dramatically in love with Kate by now, and so each time we returned to Caracas, he jumped on a bus from his village and rocked up at the apartment too, and Riza's mum generously included him as another guest at her table. I connected with Riza's mum while doing the dishes and drinking cups of café con leche. She was enormously kind. As we left the airport, she hugged me tight, saying, Mi casa y tu casa. She said it twice, and I have no doubt she meant it. We have met a couple of times when Riza was living in London, but it's been a few years now. The situation in Venezuela has deteriorated. Riza's brother lives in Texas with his family, and Riza has now settled with her daughter in Barcelona. There are constant shortages of food and medication, riots and looting every day in Caracas. Riza fears for her mother's safety and has applied for political asylum for her in Spain on the grounds that Caracas is too dangerous and that she's got nobody there, no family. Her application was denied and they are now appealing the outcome, but because of the pandemic, it will be at least a year before her papers are reviewed. What do you think will be Chavez's legacy? I asked her. Riza answered, a corrupt dictatorship, a narcos government passed on to another crook, she said, speaking of President Maduro. No country in Latin America has ever been destroyed so quickly. Her mother remains in her apartment alone. Riza and Oscar send her the medication she requires and ensure she has enough money for food. She hasn't met her latest grandchild, now aged 1. The airport in Caracas is closed indefinitely, with only humanitarian and private flights allowed to enter and leave. They have no idea when they will see her again. All I can think of is how she held me tight that day in August 2003. Mi casa y tu casa. I just wish I could offer her some support and some relief from her lonely nightmare. Riza says she will never return to Venezuela, and all she can hope for is to get her mother out safely to join her in Spain as soon as possible. If they succeed, she will just be one of the 5 million migrants forced to leave the country they loved.